Hello, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of The Rose Flame. I am glad you're here. I just continue to dive into places led by my inner man, places led by who I really am, the spirit of all creation, the life-giving spirit, the oxygen to everything alive. And, this podcast is fairly new. What I'm realizing is I am diving into topics that I didn't even realize I'd be diving into. And I have a lot of topics that I've been led to kind of look into. And so I'm glad you're here. It's exciting. It is revelatory. It is valid for now. And I feel like it is something maybe that isn't talked about all the time, but maybe it needs to be, some of these things and maybe all of these things. So what I want to talk about today is how men prostitute the divine masculine. So when I speak about prostitution, it is not in the way that maybe we would think where you're giving money for sex. This is not the prostitution that we speak of. It is more of a metaphor. But there are actually many ways that men and women prostitute the divine masculine. And what I want to get into today is how men prostitute the masculine within them often, but also within others as well. So the first way is turning purpose into ego instead of service. So the wound speaking there is that your worth is tied directly to achievement, or that love is conditional based on what you do. And the divine masculine is meant to build, protect, and serve truth. It becomes prostituted when a man chases status, money, or success to feel worthy, uses provider energy to control others or buy loyalty, and measures himself by dominance rather than integrity. So power is exchanged for validation instead of used in service of something greater. And what I was led to do is go into the father wound and the mother wound a little bit, just a little bit, okay? So the father wound that can cause this, turning purpose into ego instead of service, is the father is absent, critical, or overly competitive. So the man learns that love must be earned through achievement. He internalizes, I am only valuable if I succeed or dominate. And I think dominate is a key word there, because I feel like that's kind of what society has pushed on men, that they can't be weak, that they've got to have the one up, even, oh, the man is above the woman, and the lies that have been propagated regarding that. So a mother wound that can cause this is mother is overly controlling, dismissive, or withholds approval. So then the need for external validation just grows. And the man unconsciously uses masculine accomplishment to try to get the nurturing he didn't receive. And I think it's something that is very prevalent, especially here in America. So another way is withholding presence as power. So this comes from a fear of vulnerability or abandonment. And the characteristics of this withholding presence as power is a man may go emotionally cold to feel like he's in control, withhold communication, affection, or commitment to maintain leverage, disappear rather than face discomfort or accountability. And presence becomes a bargaining chip instead of a grounding force. The father wound that is generally accompanying this is the father was emotionally distant or neglectful, and the man learns emotion is unsafe, so he withholds it to avoid rejection. The mother wound that goes along with this is the mother was emotionally engulfing or inconsistent. So the man fears that showing needs will either be smothered or rejected. So he hides. Another way that men prostitute the divine feminine is using sexual or charismatic energy for validation. So this is an unmet need to be desired and directly related to the mother wound, which is something that continues to come up in my research. What this looks like is seducing to feel powerful, not to connect. Conquest, replacing intimacy. Needing to be admired, wanted, or chosen to feel alive. Masculine sexual energy is spent outward to fill an inward void. The father wound directly related to this is the father shamed him for sexual curiosity or masculinity, and the man overcompensates by using sexuality to feel powerful. The mother wound is inconsistent mother regarding love and attention. So the man equates sexual attention with love, using it as currency for worth. Number 4, spiritual bypassing, which is a false awakened masculine. This would have a wound in the area of shame and fear of accountability. It is stubble and common that they use spiritual language to avoid responsibility, such as, "That's just your trigger." Claiming neutrality or detachment to avoid repair. Positioning himself as above emotion, conflict, or relational work. So wisdom is prostituted to protect the ego. So the father wound looks like the father being absent, judgmental, or shaming. And the man learned to hide mistakes or deny needs to avoid criticism. The mother wound is the mother being over enmeshed or infantilizing the man. So, what is enmeshed? Blurred boundaries, leading to excessive emotional involvement, a lack of independence, and difficulty distinguishing one's own feelings and needs from another's, creating unhealthy dependence and stifling individuality. So the man learned detachment masks lack of emotional support. Number 5, overdoing, overfixing, over-controlling. So the wound is chaos in childhood, unsafe nervous system. So instead of grounded leadership, he micromanages. He fixes to avoid feeling. He controls outcomes because surrender feels dangerous. Action replaces embodiment. And that's one thing I've noticed about all of these things that I'm being led to look into, is that embodiment is the key. It's almost like words are meaningless. It's embodiment that we need. In humanity, we need to embody what we're being taught or shown in the spirit, in the secret place. Yeah, it's like head knowledge versus heart knowledge, basically. So the father wound associated with overdoing, overfixing, over-controlling is that the father was chaotic or absent, and a man learned the world is unsafe, so he must control it to survive. The mother wound is the mother was anxious or overprotective. The man learned to overcompensate with action rather than emotional presence. Number 6, abandoning inner authority for external approval. So this wound is the father wound, and it's the lack of initiation. A lack of initiation into integrated, healthy, masculine energy. This shows up as people-pleasing masked as being nice, following trends, ideologies, or partners instead of inner truth, and betraying his values to avoid rejection. The masculine direction is outsourced. The father wound is being absent, domineering, or unapproving. The man never learned self-trust. And I feel like that's such a big part of what we are learning, growing into, so many of us simultaneously, I feel like. Yeah. The mother wound is the mother was controlling or manipulative, and the man learned obedience over authenticity. Number 7, performing strength instead of living it. The wound says, I'm not enough as I am. Examples of this are stoicism without self-honesty, toughness without tenderness, and leadership without humility. Strength becomes a costume, not something that is lived out. The father was cold, judgmental, or abusive, and a man believes vulnerability is weakness and that he must perform strength. The mother wound is that the mother was overcritical or emotionally neglectful. The man hides his tender side to avoid rejection or shame. So, in general, the father wounds often lead to fear-based behaviors. Control, performance, avoidance, proving worth. In general, the mother wounds often lead to validation-seeking behaviors, seduction, people-pleasing, overcompensation, and masking vulnerability. The prostituted masculine is the product of trying to survive emotionally without healing these core wounds. So we're going to go through some father wounds and the internalized belief and behavior. Number 1, seeking female validation, conquest-based masculinity, serial relationships with the opposite sex, whether it's friendships, romantic, and then they idealize the woman and then discard them. So it's a pattern where the woman is idealized and then picked apart, whether it's a friendship or romantic relationship. Serial relationships. The father wound comes from the father withholding affirmation. Love was conditioned on performance, emotional absence or abandonment. And this internalized belief is that I must be desired to be valuable. The father himself likely never felt chosen or affirmed by his father. The son inherits the hunger, but not the language. And the distortion is that a man's worth is outsourced to women. Another way, control, dominance, or false alpha energy. So the adult behavior is authoritarian leadership, emotional intimidation, inability to receive feedback. The father wound is the father ruled through fear or shame, violence, rage, or emotional volatility. And there was no safe relational repair. The internalized belief is power keeps me safe. Think about that for a minute, because I feel like it's a very real thing when it comes to men. And they've got reasons for it, right? There's wounds, and this is the key to see. We're all just walking through this life, dealing with things passed down to us, dealing with the way we were raised. And I think we have to give ourselves grace, and then we're able to give others grace. So dominance replaces protection in the family system. Control becomes the substitute for presence, and the distortion is strength without containment. Another way is emotional shutdown or stoicism. So it's numbness, avoiding emotional intimacy, or saying I'm fine while disconnected. The father wound is the father punished vulnerability. The message as a child was man up and or emotional neglect. The internalized belief is my feelings are dangerous or useless. Emotional suppression is passed down as masculinity. I'm going to say that again. Emotional suppression is passed down as masculinity. And we see it all the time. So the distortion is presence without the heart. Another way that this is expressed is sex without intimacy, compulsive sex or pornography, using sex to regulate emotion, avoiding relational depth. And the father wound is sexual shame or secrecy in the home. The father modeled objectification or avoidance. No modeling of sacred intimacy. So the belief internalized is that connection is unsafe, but release is allowed. Sex becomes disassociation instead of union. And the distortion is a life force without reverence. Very common. Another way is spiritual bypassing. And we talked about this, but I'm evolved, so I don't need to apologize. Using spirituality to avoid accountability and detachment disguised as enlightenment. So the father was morally or spiritually superior, but emotionally unavailable. Or the father was deeply shamed and avoided responsibility. The belief internalized is if I rise above emotion, I can avoid pain, which is actually really silly and not true at all, is it? Spirituality replaces repair, and the distortion is wisdom without humility. Fear of commitment. The adult behaviors are half relationships, avoidance when intimacy deepens, chronic ambivalence, which is ambiguity, leaving things in the air, not really saying and being clear, no clarity in relationships. The father wound is that the father abandoned the family physically or emotionally, or the father was trapped and resentful. The internalized belief is commitment leads to loss of self or abandonment. And the son reenacts the rupture from both sides. The distortion is freedom without devotion. Most men are not choosing to betray the divine masculine. They are reenacting unresolved initiation wounds passed down through fathers who were never initiated themselves. A boy becomes a man not by age, but by being seen, affirmed, guided, and repaired. When that doesn't happen, masculinity becomes performance. Power replaces presence. Validation replaces worth. And we're going to talk about initiation in another session. We're going to talk about that with the topic of containment. Containing the divine feminine energy. Containing the divine masculine energy. Because the truth is that we have both of these energies within us, and either one can be distorted. So, healing does not require blaming the father. It requires grieving what was not received, separating survival strategies from identity, initiating oneself into accountability, emotional literacy, and integrity, and ending the transmission by embodying what was missing. When a man heals his father wound, he doesn't just reclaim himself. He stops the leakage in his bloodline. And that is what we're here for, you guys. This is why we are here right now. If you're listening to this, you're a part of it. There's no way around it. Or you wouldn't be here. So, now we'll go on to the mother wounds, okay? Emotional enmeshment, the good boy, little man syndrome. So the mother confides in the son, leans on him emotionally, stubbornly uses him for regulation or companionship. And what the son learns is my job is to meet a woman's emotional needs. The adult outcome? Over responsibility for women's feelings, attracting wounded feminine energy, alternates between rescuing and resenting women. And the distortion is caretaking replaces leadership. Another dynamic is conditional love through compliance. So a mother gave love or peace, but it depended on behavior. The mother withdrew, was full of guilt or emotional punishment. The mother gave the message, be good so I don't fall apart. And what the son learns is, I must suppress my truth to be loved. The adult outcome is passive masculinity, difficulty asserting boundaries, sexual or emotional compliance instead of desire. And the distortion is that harmony replaces integrity. And as I read these, I just can't help but feel for the wounds that we have had passed down to us, and well, that so many avoid, but that some of us are actually leaning into and looking into, that the healing, we could get to the roots, recreate brain patterns and structures. And we're going to talk about that at some point as well. So another way that this mother wound manifests itself is overprotection or infantilization. So the mother shields from failure, risk, or consequence. So the mother does for the child what he should be doing for himself, or she has a fear-based control disguised as care. What the son learns is I am not capable on my own. And the adult outcome is avoidance of responsibility, dependency on partners, and fear of adult roles and leaderships. So the distortion is safety replaces self-trust. So another wound is the mother being the primary source of masculine validation. So her saying things like, you're the man of the house, praising her son as special, superior, or needed, substitutes him emotionally for the father. And what the son learns is my value comes from being chosen by women. The adult outcome is seeking admiration from women, addiction to being desired, fragile ego when not affirmed. And the distortion is that validation replaces grounded worth. Another dynamic is sexual shame or purity message. So the mother framed sex as dangerous, dirty, or threatening. Or there were emotionally incestuous boundaries blurred. So mixed signals about desire and closeness. And what the son learns is my desire is unsafe or overwhelming. The adult outcome is split between Madonna/whore dynamics. compulsive sex or sexual avoidance, difficulty integrating sex and love. And the distortion is that desire splits from the heart. Another dynamic is unconscious competition with women. So this comes from the mother having a stubborn resentment of masculinity, the son aligning with mother against the father or men, or feminine pain projected onto the son. And what the son learns is masculinity causes harm. And the adult outcome is there's shame around masculine power, over identification with feminine pain, and difficulty owning assertiveness or dominance. The distortion is that power becomes guilt. Another cycle is abandonment, anxiety, and clinging. The dynamic is the mother had a fear of loss or being left. The mother had emotional collapse when the son individuates, in other words, finds his individuality. Or the mother made him feel guilty when he pulled away. What the son learns is if I leave, I destroy her. And the adult outcome is fear of separation or commitment, sabotaging relationships at depth, and avoidance of long-term bonds. The distortion is that freedom becomes threat. That's deep. Freedom becomes threat. When the father energy is absent or unsafe, and the mother's energy is entangled or conditional, the boy never fully identifies with masculinity and never fully separates from the feminine. He confuses connection with obligation. He confuses power with abandonment. And this produces the adult paradox. He craves women, he resents responsibility. He fears commitment, and he doubts his own authority. So the father's unavailable, the masculine identity is unstable. The mother overattaches. The message is the separation is unsafe. Masculinity becomes relational and not embodied. And the adult man seeks women to complete masculinity instead of expressing it. Healing requires grieving the loss of a safe masculine model, releasing unconscious loyalty to the mother's pain, separating care from obligation, reclaiming authority without guilt, allowing women to be partners, not regulators. The healthy divine masculine is not perfect. He is integrated. He is present without domination. He has direction without rigidity. He has protection without control. He is accountable without giving shame. He has sexuality that is not causing extraction. His power is rooted in integrity and not fear. The healed masculine does not need to prove itself. It knows itself. And men heal these wounds not by fixing the parents or retelling the story, but by completing what never happened developmentally: initiation, repair, and embodiment. A boy adapts. A man integrates. Healing happens when survival strategies are retired, not shamed, and replaced with lived authority, presence, and repair. Grieve the father you didn't have. Name what was missing. Allow the anger without acting on it. Let your nervous system feel the loss. A wounded masculine waits to be chosen. A healed masculine chooses. Make decisions before asking for reassurance. Notice where you ask permission emotionally, sexually, or spiritually. Practice standing in discomfort without collapsing or posturing. And the repair statement is, I can be wrong and still be whole. Reclaim accountability as power. Most men equate accountability with punishment because it was modeled that way. So accountability needs to be understood as self-authorship. Own your impact without self-attack. Apologize without explanation or defense. Repair without demanding forgiveness. Initiate yourself into structure. When the father fails to initiate, men either rebel against structure or hide inside of it. Healthy structure looks like daily physical discipline, movement, breath, and labor, clear commitments that are kept, financial, relational, and spiritual responsibility. Structure is not control, it's containment. Learn masculinity through embodied men. Male mentorship or brotherhood. Being witnessed by men who are regulated, accountable, embodied. Allowing correction without humiliation. Competition drops, respect rises. So healing the mother wound, which is attachment, desire, emotional sovereignty, and boundaries. The mother wound creates validation hunger, sexualized worth, people-pleasing or emotional withdrawal, and confusion between care and obligation. The healing path is separation, not rejection. Withdraw emotional labor from women. This is one of the hardest and most liberating steps. Stop regulating women's emotions to feel safe or worthy. Notice when you rush to fix, rescue, or appease. Allow women to feel disappointment without collapsing. Stop using charm or withdrawal to manage their reactions. So you've got to stomach steadiness instead of anxiety when someone is upset. So decouple desire from worth. If being desired equals being valuable, masculinity is fragile. So the repair requires periods of celibacy or sexual intention. Sexuality rooted in presence and not performance. And learning to tolerate not being chosen. The truth to embody is I am not less when I am not wanted. Release the loyalty to the mother's pain. Many men unconsciously carry their mother's grief, resentment, or fear, and it shows up as guilt around independence, fear of disappointing women, over identification with feminine suffering. The truth is, I honor what you endured, and I do not carry it for you. The somatic shift is that your breath drops from your chest into your belly. Establish boundaries without withdrawal. Boundaries are not walls. So, things like this: saying no without disappearing. Hold your ground without aggression. Stay present during relational tension. Your voice can remain steady. Your eye contact maintained. And here's a big one. Integrate sex and the heart. The mother wound often splits desire from intimacy. Healing includes slowing the sexual pace, naming feelings during intimacy, and choosing connection over conquest. Sex becomes nourishing instead of draining. The healed masculine. Worth becomes intrinsic. Desire becomes choice, not hunger. Power becomes grounded. Emotion becomes accessible, not overwhelming. He does not chase or withhold. He repairs instead of disappears. He leads without controlling. He loves without losing himself. And this is how you know it's embodied and not just conceptual. Less urgency to prove or perform. Comfort with silence and uncertainty. Ability to stay during conflict. Sexual energy feels stable, not compulsive. And presence feels natural, not effortful. Healing the father wound restores authority. Healing the mother wound restores sovereignty. Sovereignty. Together, they produce a man who does not need validation, does not fear intimacy, does not confuse power with control, and does not outsource his masculinity. He doesn't announce his strength. He inhabits it. And I think that if we would be honest, this is where we are headed when it comes to the divine masculine and masculinity in general. We are in a pivotal time in history when the ways of old are slowly dissolving, and there are more healthy dynamics within relationship of self first and then others. And though it may be painful to look within to see this, it may be hard to feel the loss, feel the emotions, go through those places. There's no other way. If we don't face the patterns, if we don't be honest with ourselves, it'll never change. And then we'll pass it down to our children, and we're never going to really be everything that we are desiring to be, that we are destined to be. And I'm going to end that here. The next episode, we will go into how women prostitute the divine masculine. So I hope you'll join me for that. And I hope you have a good night, day, morning, evening, whatever it is.